My Pixelated Shadow by Radonka. Pokémon. You know, the small world inside of a Game Boy cartridge that was introduced to us in the early 90s. 1998 to be exact. The little pixelated sprites that you sent out to fight each other inside of the game. I most certainly remember those good times. Sadly, I think my view of the lovable creatures will forever be tainted. So it was a normal summer. I had just finished watching the last episode of the first series of the Pokémon animation, spending hours in front of my TV, only leaving to use the bathroom or grab some food from the kitchen. Once the credits rolled, I picked myself up from my spot in front of the TV and headed for my bedroom. Grabbing my Game Boy on my desk, I loaded up my Pokémon Blue version. The title screen was present, then I hit the continue button. It was now loaded into Pallet Town. Playing the game as usual, I could not help but notice a small patch of darker pixels behind my character, like it was meant to show a Pokemon sprite behind me, or maybe even a shadow. I put this pixel error down to my game being rather old now, seeing as it was 2010. It played fine all the way up to the Elite Four, but by this time it was midnight, so I went to sleep. I guess I'll play another game tomorrow. It was a new day, so waking up at almost 7 AM, I grabbed my Game Boy and headed downstairs to the living room. I crashed out on the sofa. Faintly in the background I could hear my mum waking up too. She slowly made her way downstairs and said, "Morning, honey. What do you want for breakfast?" I paused for a moment, wondering if I could get away with asking for pancakes. "Pancakes if you would not mind, Mum," I replied. "Sure, honey. Pancakes coming right up." So now with breakfast on its way, I settled down for another session of Pokemon fun. Loading up my Pokemon Blue again, I could still faintly see the darker patch of pixels behind my character as he walked around. Looking back at it, I remembered I had heard about this issue before, but I never took it as an issue rather than a graphical error. So I opened up my laptop and typed into a Google search, "Issues with Pokemon Blue, Shadow of Pixels." And to my surprise, one real link regarding my issue, and thousands of ones regarding my Pokemon Blue entry in the search. So I decided to click on the link, which took me to a forum room regarding the first and second generation of Pokemon. It was the section named Gen 1 and 2 Pixel Patch Error, so I opened the first set of images, and to my surprise it looked the exact same as my game. My character sprite facing forward and a darker patch of pixels behind him, as if it were meant to be a shadow of a Pokemon. So I went further down the screen before I reached the bottom post. The title of the post was, "Don't talk to it, it will be your end." This sounded interesting, so I opened the post and began to read over. But reading through the post, there were certain words in all caps, so I just briefly read over the post. The words that stood out were, "Help, it is coming for you, it is behind you." Closing the web browser, I returned to my game, but the black pixel patch was gone. Saddened as I wanted to see if interacting with the pixel patch, I shut off the game. Remembering that this post was talking about the first and second generation, I decided to run to my room and grab my Pokemon Crystal version. Heading down, my mom placed a plate of pancakes stacked on them on the coffee table in the living room. "Thanks, Mum," I shouted towards the kitchen. Digging into my pancakes, I then booted up my Crystal version, but sadly I had no continue file on this. The save section of the cartridge had died, I guess, so I clicked New Game. Starting again, I went through the tutorials, battled my rival for the first time, and gave Professor Elm the Poké-Egg from Mr. Pokemon. So now with the Poké-Egg delivered and my rival beaten, I was now free to begin my own journey once again in Pokemon Crystal. Upon reaching the entrance to Cherry Grove City, the old man that gives you a map was at the entrance again, and once again went through the tutorial. But instead of giving me an item, he just stated, "Heed my words, the shadow will follow you. Please, don't talk to it," before he shuffled off to his home. After he left, I suddenly noticed that darker patch of pixels again. I wondered, what would happen if I spoke to it? So I turned my character around, but was too scared to hit the A button, so I just continued as usual. I beat the gym in Violet City, Sprout Tower fell shortly after, and I headed to Azalea Town, then went through Goldenrod City. Upon deafening the gym, I knew I would be able to remove Sudowoodo from the trees and head to Akurtek City. Badly beaten and battered by trainers on the way, I headed for the Pokemon Center. I asked Nurse Joy to heal my Pokemon, and after she returned them to me, instead of "see you again soon," she just had "bye. Remember, don't look behind you." Then the text box closed and I left the Poke Center. Confused and a little frightened about the dialogue, I headed into the gym, but to be honest, it was a lot different compared to the countless times I'd entered it before. With the path already lightened up, I was now in front of the gym leader, Morty. We battled as usual till I reached his big Pokémon, but instead of him sending out his Gengar, it was just simply another Haunter who fell to my Croconaw. Beating him, he gave me the Fog Badge, some Pokéyen, and a TM before giving a strange dialogue box. Well, you beat me. Would have had you if my Gengar was here. Still miss him. Before ending with ellipsis and an exclamation mark above his head. It faded to black, and then back in. He was gone. I left at the gym and no one was around, so I went to the Pokemon Center. He still managed to knock some HP off my Pokemon, so I felt healing was needed before talking to my rival again. Again, the same dialogue started. Don't look behind you. I then went to the Burn Tower, only to be presented with a note-like item in the middle of the floor. I walked my sprite up to it and pressed A. It said, "Go to the ruins of Elf. I will be waiting." Then the text box closed. I thought it must be my rival who wants to battle, so I went to the ruins of Elf. And after reaching the caves, I went in and was presented with a puzzle as you would when you visit this place. But instead of an Omanite, Kabuto, or even an Aerodactyl, it was the shadow-like outline of a Pokemon. Unsettled by this, I left the last places in the wrong positions before searching through the Pokédex online, trying to match the outline of the Pokemon shape. I was presented with two options, Clefable or Gengar. Slowly I reversed the two incorrect pieces of the puzzle, and it played a correct sound, and then the floor caved in. Expecting to be in the ruins of Elf, but instead I fell into a dark cave, very similar to Diglett's cave, but no walls in the middle or path to follow. My character sprite was barely visible, but I could make out his position on screen. Suddenly a light source illuminated the top half of the screen. As I walked closer, it was a small campfire-like sprite that was emitting the light source. Without warning, the black patch of pixels behind my sprite detached itself from me and moved around to the other side of the fire. Slowly regaining its true form, I was horrified to see the Pokemon it was, Gengar. It stood tall, and its eyes were a piercing red with dark black pupils. I tried to move my character, but all that was stated in a text box was, "Sean is too scared to move." I thought only Pokemon did that, like when you encountered Ghost in Lavender Town's Pokemon Tower. Suddenly the fire went out, and a piercing, high-pitched scream emanated from the speakers, slowly trailing off and getting softer before stopping altogether. Then the screen flashed red, then white, then black once again. Then the fire was relit, but what was in the place of where my sprite once stood was a gravestone and a grave. The dark figure on the other side of the Gengar, with his trademark smile on its face. I never once went against the words of the NPCs telling me not to speak to the patch of dark pixels, but to be honest, I wish I had. Maybe it would have put me through my misery quickly. Maybe I could just shut off the game. All I know is, Gengar is my pixelated shadow. I now understand why people find Gengar scary. Its ability to steal life of its targets by transforming its prey's shadow silently waits for an opponent to strike. That was my pixelated shadow. Final thoughts? Oh my god, this sucked. The first line of this story is hilarious. It calls 1998 the early 90s. No, that's the late 90s, unless the mid-90s don't exist and the late 90s was just 1999. That was the first sentence, and the story never really got better. It's absolutely full of typos, missing words, run-on sentences, and very awkwardly worded sentences that the author never corrected despite telling me it's ready. I think the shadow idea is kind of cool, but the execution is poor and very lazy. And it just goes into the characters saying stuff that they don't say in the games, you know, that crap you see in almost every story. Once again, this is why you don't rush the story. I've been lied to. I was told by the author that this story had been peer edited and was ready to be on the show, yet it's not even done. Next time I'm going to refuse to accept a story until one of my moderators has looked at it to prevent this from happening again. That's it for this week's Creepypasta. Thanks for watching all the way through. If you want to see more of my Creepypasta readings, or read some of these stories on the forum where they're written by my fans, the links are in the description. Next week we'll be doing yet another story written and sent in by the fans with Celestial Tower. Until next time, sweet dreams.